Welcome back to Loosening Up, the KA-EMDR podcast. I'm Danielle Ciccone,
And I'm Michele Topel.
and today it's just going to be Michelle and I. We don't have a guest today. We are going to be just chatting with each other about kind of what we've been up to lately, what's going on at our training institutes, things that we've been working on, and maybe a little bit about our own clients, or we'll see what we get into. But yeah, we just kind of wanted to give a little update behind the scenes of what's been going on with us. Um, let's see, we started this podcast close to 6 months ago. I think it was February and it's now July. So almost. And we've had some awesome interviews and some awesome guests. So this has been going great. And we have more lined up. We can, we'll continue to talk with more of our students. But yeah, we just kind of wanted to talk with each other today. So yeah.
Well, so Danielle, it seems like the maybe the biggest thing that we've been working on, and I know you've been sort of taking the lead on this, is creating this new course that we're going to be launching in August, the Optimizing KA-EMDR
Mhm.
course. And so maybe you can start by telling our listeners a little bit about what the plans are for this new course.
Yeah, I would love to. Um, so yeah, the idea of this course, because we've been talking about wanting to create more content, right? And I think what we sort of decided is like, let's try to focus on any gaps that people seem to be having in terms of their understanding or their application of this after they take the introductory course, right? And as they're trying to implement it, what are some of the potential gaps that maybe people are having a hard time with? And that's information that we've gathered over the last year and a half since we started teaching that intro course. So, through consultation, through our experiential trainings, we've just kind of noticed some areas where, there's some kind of gaps. And so that's what we decided to focus on is like we wanted our next course to be sort of a deepening, I guess, of understanding for some of the concepts that we started to introduce in the introductory course, but it's an intro course, so you can't really get into, all the nuances of things in an intro course. So yeah, so that's kind of what we decided. And there will be other topics in the future on, more advanced things, but I think for now we really wanted to sort of make sure people understand some of the really core principles that we think are important when they're applying this with their clients. So, yeah,
So what is the perhaps the one core concept that you're really emphasizing in this course?
it's hard to pick just one, but I would say, well, really it's really centered around memory reconsolidation, which is like
Mhm.
such a core process that we really emphasize in our intro course and something we're both, really interested in. Um, and something that I think, some EMDR trainings touch on, but not many from what I've seen. Um, so, really making sure people understand what that process is, what it requires, just how the brain works in that regard, and sort of what the necessary experiences are that people have to have in order for the memory reconsolidation process to actually occur,
Mhm.
and then how to really try to facilitate that as much as possible when doing KA-EMDR with clients and not forcing it, but really trying to be intentional about how we do the work so that hopefully we increase the chances of that happening, right? And so it starts from case conceptualization, like what are we working on and why, and how are we choosing what we're going to target with this type of therapy, and how does that relate to their symptoms and all that, right? Which we know is super important for EMDR, period. But really keeping memory reconsolidation in mind as you're even just starting with that phase one work, case conceptualization, all the way through, actually doing the reprocessing. Um, So, yeah, that's really kind of the core emphasis, and it's all about just things to keep in mind when you're trying to facilitate that process.
Yeah, and for our listeners who have taken our introductory course or even done some consultation or the experiential training, I think just in its simplest terms perhaps that what we're talking about is the importance of making that past present connection, right? Like
Mhm.
how how can we understand our clients' present day difficulties in terms of what happened in the past?
Mhm.
And and again, I think so much of the work that we've done thus far, I hope, has kind of laid the groundwork for memory reconsolidation as being sort of one of the foundational premises
Mhm.
of particularly ketamine. Like when you're adding ketamine to the EMDR, this is our hypothesis that that's really what potentiates
Mhm.
the possibility for memory reconsolidation to occur. Um,
Mhm.
and for people who maybe aren't as familiar with the term memory reconsolidation, maybe you can just talk a little bit about how we can understand that in AIP terms, right? Which I
Mhm.
think most of our listeners might understand adaptive information processing because that is taught a lot
Mhm.
in EMDR training. So maybe you can just touch on that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and really, I mean, I see the 2 concepts, I guess, as one and the same, but it's not typically taught that way. So, the AIP model, which was, of course, was developed by Francine Shapiro, which I think is brilliant and is sort of the whole, you know, underlying orientation, I guess, or the whole, theory underneath EMDR and why it works. Um, and then memory reconsolidation is something that actually comes more from the neuroscience literature. And I've probably talked about this on here before. I can't remember, but Bruce Ecker is somebody who really I adore, by the way. Um, but he has really helped bring the sciency stuff, the kind of difficult to understand neuroscience, and kind of brought it into the psychotherapy field. To my knowledge, I think he's really the one that kind of did that. And so, he has helped me understand how the process that we're trying to accomplish with EMDR via the AIP, adaptive information processing model or process, I guess, is kind of the same as memory reconsolidation. Essentially, I mean, just to make it really, really simple, it's about linking information, right? It's about taking something that's been encoded in the brain, information that's been encoded via past experiences, and linking it up with different, new, adaptive information. I mean, at the most basic level, that's how I see it. So there's different language, you know, in AIP language versus memory reconsolidation language, but I pretty much see them as the same concepts. Like we're trying to look at and uncover what did the person learn, what information got stored, what got encoded in their past experiences, which could have been big T traumas, could have been, quote unquote small T traumas, adverse life experiences. How is that driving current symptoms, triggers, present day difficulties, and what new information basically needs to be sort of added in or linked up with to kind of update basically
Right.
that information, right? Because it's often outdated somehow. Maybe it was true in the past, but it's not true anymore. Or maybe there's, you know, something new has developed that the brain needs to register, right? So, yeah, it's kind of hard to give this in a nutshell because it's complicated neuroscience stuff, but basically that's what it comes down to, right? Is like linking up old information and new information and actually updating it on a um like literally on a physiological level in the brain.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I have to say for me, before I even really understood. memory reconsolidation. I mean, I'm not a neuroscientist, so my understanding isn't maybe complete, but from what I do know about memory reconsolidation and adaptive information processing, before I even really fully understood that, I think I would always approach a client with this curiosity of not the symptom being the problem so much as what about this symptom was a solution?
Mhm.
Because when I reframe it in those terms, it sort of flips everything on its head, right? Because I think traditional psychotherapy is so much about, oh, let's get rid of these symptoms or let's, try to minimize these symptoms.
Mhm.
And, fair enough. But I think to me, it's really important to be curious about what was this a solution to? How,
Mhm.
how does this adaptation in what context did this make sense? And that to me is sort of like almost like the breadcrumbs, the clues that will take you to where you need to go.
Totally. And it's I mean, that's a big part of what we're gonna talk about too, and Bruce Ecker really is the guy who helped me really understand that, that, the symptom makes sense when you find out what information did the brain encode, what meaning did the person make out of whatever their past experiences were, and how did they develop these symptoms as a result of that in a very Bruce Ecker uses the word coherent way, in a very coherent way that actually makes a lot of sense. Symptoms are not random. They're not just, you know, pathological even, really,
No,
you
they're
know?
adaptive on a
Yeah.
certain level, right?
Yeah. It's just that
They were adaptive
they
at the
were adaptive.
time.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's where that kind of like, okay, new information has to come in to help update the system. Hmm. And that's sort of how we see the I guess that's what we see as the solution, if you will, to the symptom, right? Is to kind of inform the brain really about this new information that needs to be registered, considered, you know, um, so that that symptom maybe isn't necessary anymore,
Well,
like it maybe once
and to
was.
and to um, target that material as specifically as possible in a very um, strategic way, but also a very systematic way, which I hope this course will kind of help walk people through. But
Mhm,
also, I just have to say, you were talking about Bruce Ecker, and I know you've done some consultation with him and read a
mhm,
lot of his work. And I just have to kind of shout out the fact that I remember when our paper was published
mhm.
in the European Journal of Psychotraumatology that you forwarded it to Bruce
Yes,
and that he apparently read it and was a fan of the work. So that I'm sure must have felt really good to you.
that was really cool. Yeah, he's not a ketamine guy, but I really think, and my intention one day when I have some time is to talk to him more because I'd love to hear more of his thoughts about what we're proposing, right? How because he has already put out information about how EMDR by itself can facilitate memory reconsolidation. So, it's in his book, Unlocking the Emotional Brain. He did a little short course on it. I think he was even on the Notice That podcast with Melissa and Bridger, I think. So that was a great episode, by the way, if anyone wants to listen to that. Um, so he was already talking about EMDR and memory reconsolidation. But what we are sort of bringing to the table is like, and if you add in low dose ketamine, mm, our theory, our hypothesis is that that process can be facilitated even more readily, more easily because of what ketamine does in the brain, right? And kind of the experiential subjective effects of it, how it allows clients to kind of go places they otherwise can't go, realize things they otherwise can't realize, bring things into conscious awareness that is otherwise very difficult to do. So yeah, I want to talk to him more one day about like what he thinks about this. I think he'd be pretty excited, and yeah, it was really cool to get his, I don't know, his positive feedback after we sent him that.
Well, and also, and we talk about this in the intro course and we talk about this a lot, but I think it's worth emphasizing that in order to really potentiate that memory reconsolidation, that the science would give us clues that the timing of administration is really key in that, which I think is something we I think hopefully have laid out pretty clearly in our protocol, the KA-EMDR protocol. Um,
Yeah.
but also I just want to say, if it's okay, talking about things that we've done in the past and the paper that was published last year, it just occurred to me, Danielle, that
Mm,
it was exactly 2 years ago that you and I met each
mm,
other. It was in July of 2024.
that's right.
And just, looking back at what we've been doing together for 2 years, it seems like so much more than 2
It
years.
does. It really does.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I know that you, are the person who's more in charge of, like, the back end stuff, but I wonder whether you could speak to, like, how many people have taken our intro course now? Do you know kind of
It's,
offhand?
yeah, it's about 500, somewhere in that ballpark. Um, yeah. So, I mean, we've reached a lot of people, and it's been across the United States. We've had a few people in Canada, a few people in the UK, Lithuania,
Poland?
Poland. That was really cool to see how it reached these other countries, which I never would have imagined. And, that the interest is growing there too. Um, yeah, it's been really cool to see how many people we've reached, and all of our stuff is online, which, has its downsides because we don't get to see people in person, but I think one of the perks is that we get to reach a lot of people and it's accessible to a lot of people. Um, so yeah, that's been awesome. And then, the experiential trainings, which is kind of the second step. Gosh, we've probably done, I wanna say
Couple
maybe
dozen?
20? Yeah,
Yeah.
somewhere around there, 20, maybe even 25. Uh, and that's been really cool to actually, meet people. I mean, it's virtual, but still we get to interact and actually see people apply this and experience it. And, we've had some people talk about that who have been on this podcast, and that part's been awesome. Consulting with people, hearing their stories of how they've applied it with their clients and the transformations that they're seeing. I mean, yeah, it's way beyond, I think, what you and I were originally intending for this.
Way beyond.
So it's been very, very busy. Um, very busy couple of years, but good. Very good. Uh, very rewarding. Yeah.
Um, so I wonder, is there anything that just I don't know. I mean, obviously, we've both, I think, learned an awful lot in the process of doing this work together and
Mm.
doing the research paper and then also launching the training institute. But um, I guess I'm curious, what's if there's one thing that comes to mind that has changed the way that you work with clients?
That's actually a good question. And I think it has because, well, I mean, just you and I coming together in the first place, right? And really refining this whole thing together because as we've shared before, you and I were both, doing this type of work with our clients before we ever met each other. But it was us really putting our heads together and, discussing this that helped us really refine how we work with our clients, how we do this protocol. Um, but even beyond the initial like creation of the protocol, if you will, um, yeah, I mean, I think especially actually writing this course has really kind of forced me to even think about how do I conceptualize a case? I know how to add ketamine to EMDR reprocessing. We figured that out, right? We really kind of nailed that down and refined that. But that was a big mystery, you know, over 2 years ago. But then it's like, okay, how do you take a complex human being and actually figure out where to start, or how to actually basically, yeah, conceptualize the case and plan plan the treatment. So yeah, writing this course really forced me to kind of draw on what have I learned from both EMDR trainings, which I've done a lot of, and the memory reconsolidation science, which I've also done a lot of studying of, and how do I actually apply that with my own clients? And as I've been kind of thinking about that, writing about that, I think it has refined what I'm doing with my own clients. I haven't actually taken many new clients recently because we've been so busy, but the few that I have, probably in the last year, I think I've done a much better job with because,
Mhm.
when you teach something, um, it really forces you to think about what you're doing, you
Mhm.
know? So I think my care of my own clients has definitely improved through
Mhm.
this process because, like I said, it's forced me to think about what is important, how do I convey that to somebody else, and then am I actually doing that in my own practice, you know?
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I think for me, I tend to be much more, um, intentional or curious about what is it that we can provide? What is it that I can provide or encourage in terms of the disconfirming experience, right? So
mhm,
whatever that original traumatic experience was that created the adaptation,
mhm,
what can we pair it with that will create either the disconfirming experience or the prediction error? I know we
mhm,
talk about the
mhm,
prediction error a lot.
mhm.
So
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
I think for me, I've become much clearer
right.
about what that might be, and the fact that that is actually what needs to happen to update the memory and to
Mhm.
process the traumatic material, because that's
Yeah.
ultimately, of course, what our goal is.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, that was something I knew, but again, when you're trying to distill it down into something you can teach to someone else, it just forces you to really make sure you understand it. And
Mhm.
then, it just brings it so much more into your conscious awareness when you're actually working with a client. So, yeah, I would say that that's true for me too. Um, being a lot more, yeah, mindful of that, you know.
Mhm.
Um, and also, I think probably the other thing I would add to that is really trusting the process more.
Mhm.
I mean,
Mhm.
it's something that we hear all the time, trust the process, trust the process. But the more we've studied this, taught it, watched it happen in our experiential trainings with people that don't know each other but are just showing up to do deep work together, it has reaffirmed in my system, like, this works.
Mhm.
And I can kinda, not that I don't have to still do my job and be, intentional and all the things we were just talking about, but I can really trust it a a lot,
Mhm.
even more than I did when you and I first, like, developed this. My
Mhm.
trust in this process, my trust in this protocol, the brain, like, it's just grown
Mhm.
a ton,
Yeah.
and yeah.
Well, I know, that when I first learned EMDR, that one of the things that I remember hearing was that the human system, the human brain, nervous system, just all of that inclines naturally in the direction of healing, right?
Mhm,
That there is, I don't know if you wanna call it a natural healing intelligence or just a natural intelligence that we can access and that ketamine seems to make more available.
mhm.
So,
Yep, and that's something we've heard, but, it's one thing to sort of know it as a concept, it's another thing to really keep witnessing it over and over and over again,
mhm,
and like we said, really trusting it, you know?
yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it can really be magic. I know we talk about this a lot, that on a day when I'm seeing a bunch of back-to-back KA-EMDR clients in my
Mhm.
practice, that at the end of the day, I feel jazzed, I feel
Mhm.
energetic, I feel excited, I don't feel depleted or burnt out because it really, like, sometimes, maybe not every day, but
Yeah.
often we get to kinda witness almost like these little sort of miraculous transformations take
Mhm.
place, and, and
Yep.
that feels so great. So, um,
Totally.
I don't wanna, cut this too short because I think this is important, stuff that we're talking about and definitely worth sharing. But I wonder if in the time we have left, we could talk a little bit about the upcoming conference.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
we are going to be, presenting, and also we'll have, a booth at the
Mhm.
upcoming EMDRIA International Conference in Anaheim in
Mhm.
August, and so do you wanna talk a little bit about some of the planning and preparation that we've been doing, leading up to that?
Yeah. Yeah, so we're really, really excited to get to actually present on this topic. We were pretty surprised last year when we went to the conference, there was nobody presenting on ketamine or psychedelics at all, um, which they had in previous years, so it was just kind of odd, in my opinion, that nobody was either nobody, well, we put in a proposal, but they didn't accept it last year. So for whatever reason, there was just nothing on that topic. So this year, it was really good to see that for whatever reason, they were more open to it this year. So yeah, I mean, it's going to be a 90-minute presentation, which it was actually pretty hard to try to boil down everything we wish we could talk about in 90 minutes. So, it's of course going to be kind of a brief introduction to the idea of integrating low dose ketamine within EMDR therapy, which is the name of the talk. We're really not going to be able to get into the nitty gritty of the protocol per se, but at least really helping people understand why it might be a good idea, what it could possibly look like. And you're going to present a really great case presentation, which I'm really excited for people to hear about a remarkable transformation that one of your clients experienced. So yeah, putting that together has been quite a bit of work, but that's all submitted. So we're just getting ready to present that. And then the booth has been fun to think about how we want to, interact with people and share a little bit more about our training program and, yeah, just hopefully get more people excited about this work because I know for some people, this is like kind of a mysterious, strange idea to incorporate ketamine into EMDR therapy. So my hope is that we'll kind of demystify that a little bit, make it sound not so scary, and help people really get excited about the possibilities that it opens up. So yeah, it should be fun. It should really be fun. So lots of stuff going on. I mean, like I said, it's been a really busy couple months preparing for all this stuff, but if it means more people get trained and more clients get this kind of help, it's worth it, right? And that's what's actually been probably one of the coolest things is hearing how people are looking for this now.
Mm.
I've heard I've even had people come into my practice and say, "I heard the podcast. I'm really interested in this." And I've heard other consultees who have, had prospective clients reach out to them because they heard about this. And that's what gets me most excited, really. It's like people who need help actually knowing that this is an option and
Mhm.
looking for it.
Yeah, and I know we've added an awful lot of therapists now to our to our therapist directory,
Mhm.
um, and I know we've been talking a little bit about how the criteria is going to change soon for being added to the therapist directory, but how many
Yeah.
therapists do we have now? Do you remember?
There's probably, I wanna say about 40 people
Mhm.
on there. I'd have to look, but yeah, about that. And these are people who, have come through all of our trainings. We've done some consultation with them, so we know that they're ready to take a client. Um, we don't have people in every single state yet, which is my goal, right? Is to have someone listed in every single state. Um, we've got a lot of them covered, but not every single one yet. But yeah, that's been great to be able to promote people's practices and to hear that they're actually getting referrals. Because again, that's what this is all about, right? Is actually connecting up with the people who need this kind of care. So that's been exciting to grow that.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
we've done a lot in the last 2 years since we met each
we
other
have.
in July of 2024. It's
Yeah.
really been a pretty remarkable ride, and I've still only met you once.
Yeah, that's very strange. Even though now you live in the same we live in the same state now, thank
Yeah,
goodness. At least
at
we're in the
least
same time zone.
exactly, exactly.
So it'll be good to see you again in August and spend
Yeah.
some time together, and then maybe after that's over, we can, like, take a trip together or something and not be glued to our laptops doing this work, and we can actually, like, enjoy some time together. So I look forward to that because it's been an awful lot of work, and it's stressful at times, right? Like, we are, organizing a lot of things, and it's not been easy, but,
Yeah, so what's your biggest challenge been?
hmm, I don't know what the biggest challenge has been. I mean, it's just, we're working with a lot of people, and so there's just a lot of probably the experiential trainings, to be honest with you, that's a lot to organize to make those actually run smoothly. It's a miracle that they run as smoothly as they do because there's a lot that goes into making them work. So, that's pretty time intensive and making sure everybody's ready to go. It always ends up working out great, but preparing for them is pretty challenging, especially because we offer them a lot more now. Originally, I think we were thinking maybe every couple months or something, and now we've, been offering them twice a month and maybe even 3 times. We'll see how the demand might grow after the conference, but yeah, I think that's been one of the toughest parts. It's just, getting everything organized and so that people are prepared so that when they come, they can have a good experience,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah, and, I in all of the experientials that we've done now and all of these students, I mean, I think really I can't think of a single situation where people didn't come away from those trainings having had a really positive experience, and, um
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there's a variety of personal experiences. But I think between what the students experience themselves and what they hear or witness happening in the group,
mhm,
yeah, I mean, there's always been something really remarkable to kind of observe or hear about or witness in those, which is that's really my favorite part, right? Because the intro training, it's lecture, it's watching video of you and I working with clients, which really hope people enjoy and I hope it's valuable and informative. But to see it actually come to life for people and to actually watch it, that's that's the coolest part.
mhm,
So it's a lot of work, but it's so worth it. Every
yeah.
time we say, okay, that was a lot of work, but it was so worth it. So,
Well, and also, I don't know whether this is something where we wanna tip our hand, but, maybe it would be worth mentioning that in this upcoming, course that we're gonna be launching soon,
mhm.
there's actually an example of a real life video of you and I working together.
Yep. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I was thinking about talking about that today. Yeah, and that was a decision that we came to, because we wanted to do another demonstration, in this new course. So we thought about, should we bring in a volunteer? Should we bring in a real one of our real clients? And I don't know, I think it just felt right to both of us to actually do it together. Of course, it's a really vulnerable thing, so it's a hard thing to ask clients to do, right? We could, but it's a hard thing to ask clients to do. We could have brought in a volunteer like we did with the intro course, but something just felt right about doing it together. And I think you kind of spoke to this, and I would say the same. Like we want to show people that we're like real human beings that do this ourselves as
Mhm,
clients. We have our own stuff, and in fact, that's a big part of why we're so passionate about this. We are whole human beings. We're not just therapists or teachers, consultants. Like, we are people with our own histories and our own difficulties. And we wanted to, I don't know, kind of show that,
mhm,
you know, um, we're not separate from the process somehow.
mhm.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
it was a very powerful experience, I think. And
Mhm.
so I hope that when we launch this course that people will appreciate that and
Yeah.
hopefully benefit from it as well.
Yeah, I hope so too. Yeah, it was really brave of you. I mean, you were in the client role. So, and it was real. It was not scripted. It was not, in fact, I barely edited it at all. I edited it very lightly just to try to keep it to about an hour. But I mean, the content's all there. It's real life stuff. So I'm really grateful that you were willing to do that. And I would have done the same. I'm pretty open myself, but it was a privilege to be able to do that with you. So
Yeah.
I'm glad we did. And I hope they like it. It was pretty powerful, like you said. Just a great demonstration, and when we, uh, when we hit record and we said, "Okay, we're gonna do this session," we both agreed that whatever happens, happens, and if we get some good material that we can use for the course, great, and if not, that's okay too, So we were, like, intentional about trying not to force something to happen just so we could put it in the course, but it just naturally unfolded beautifully, you
Hmm.
know, as it often does with this work. So,
All right. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap up then, since we're
yeah.
out of time for today.
Yeah. Well, it was good to just chat with you. We don't get to do this enough. We're
I
usually
know.
busy planning things, so it was nice to just reflect together. Um, yeah, so we'll be back probably in a couple weeks, few weeks with another guest, but we hope our listeners enjoy just kind of hearing what's been going on with us behind the scenes. So
Yeah.
and
And for anyone who's planning to be at the conference in Anaheim in August, we hope to see you there. Please come and
yeah.
look for us
Uh,
and see us at our booth or
yeah.
come to our presentation, which will be on Sunday, the
Yeah.
last day of the conference.
Yep. Yeah. So we hope to see some of you there.
All right.
Okay, Michelle. I'll talk to you later.
All right. Bye, Danielle.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Loosening Up, the KA-EMDR podcast. If you'd like to learn more, visit www.ketamineassistedemdr.com, where you can find out more about our research, our training programs, and you can also find a KA-EMDR therapist to work with.